I am a woman in my early 30s, living alone in a small house at the beginning of a quiet side street in the UK. The street is a maze of roads off the main thoroughfare, which means that, apart from delivery people and the occasional shopkeeper, you rarely meet anyone you don't know. I don't know all my neighbors, but I know what they look like and I know where they live. I can find out about their cars, etc. This oddity happened a few months ago. I work from home, so I'm usually at home, and sometimes I have nothing to do. The first day was one of those lazy days. It was about 4 in the afternoon, and I was sitting on the couch watching some stupid detective show about aliens or something. Someone knocked on the door. I have a security camera hidden in a wooden shed above the front door, so I checked to see who it was, because I wasn't expecting deliveries and couldn't be bothered with the vendor. It was a woman about 40, 50 years old by the looks of it. Very neatly dressed, wearing very expensive clothes and even jewelry. Stuff I could never afford. Most people in the neighborhood couldn't afford it either. We are by no means an affluent neighborhood, and my attention was caught by this lady. She looked worried and agitated, peering toward the garden behind the house and then trying to peer through the tiny frosted window in the front door. I noticed she had a dog leash in her hands but didn't see a dog. As it happens, there are 2 hedges at the far end of my garden behind my house. One hedge is on my property, and the second hedge outside my council-owned boundary, along a small lawn where people walk their dogs. I know for a fact that there is a hole in the council-owned hedge, something I've reported to the council at least a dozen times over the last 10 years, and they have taken the square root of what they have done. However, because of my hedge, I can't get to her and do anything on my own. So when I saw the dog chain, I thought, oh no, her dog must have gone through that hole. If it's a big dog, it won't get through into my garden, but if it's a small dog, it can get through, and I always have some cooked meat, so I figured I could get it out. I'm a dog lover at heart, so of course I want to help this woman if I can. When I was a kid, my dog also went missing for a few weeks, and I thought I would never get him back. I was heartbroken in those weeks, but thankfully we got him back, and since then I've been very enthusiastic about helping those in need of a pet. Anyway, I open the door and this woman looks at me strangely, like she expected someone else to open the door and I shouldn't be there. My mom actually lived here too, so I didn't pay attention to this strange sight. Maybe she was waiting for her. Anyway, I said hello and she just stared at me for a long 30 seconds before trying to look past me and asking to see Margaret. I don't know what it has to do with other people's mistakes, but when someone gets a number wrong, I always apologize as if it were my fault. So I did. I apologize and tell her that there is no Margaret at this address. She looks at me again, but this time there's anger in her eyes. No, there is, she insists. At this point, it occurs to me that I have a relative named Margaret, but she lives about 60 miles away, and I haven't seen her in years. However, just in case she has mixed up addresses, I ask, "Are you looking for Margaret?" And I say the name, but she just hisses at me. "You know perfectly well who I'm looking for. What did you do?" To her? At this point, I'm completely lost. I've lived here for 20 years and I know the names of the previous owners, so I know she's not asking about them. I also know the names of the neighbors and the names of the people who have lived on this street since I've been here and since I moved in. And none of them are named Margaret. So all I can do is tell her she has the wrong address. No, that's both her name and her address. You're lying. It's been a little disturbing. I mean, this is actually at the right address. She knocked on the wrong door. However, she clearly thinks I did something to someone who, to my knowledge, has never lived here. I don't know how long the previous owner owned this house, but it must have been at least 30 years before someone named Margaret could actually live here. At this point, I noticed that she carelessly wrapped the dog leash around her clenched fist as if she was going to use it as a weapon. I did a lot of self-defense in my youth, so it's not that I'm afraid of it, but I'm clearly starting to worry about the situation brewing. After all, I don't really feel like picking a fight on my doorstep with a complete stranger. I'm torn between closing the door in her face and trying to defuse the situation. I finally open the door a little so she has someone to target, and I tell her, "Look, I don't know who you're looking for, but if you think something happened to your friend, maybe just call the police and let them handle it." And indeed, The woman clenched her fist, wrapping the lead around my door. Later, I find that she has hit the door so hard that she has cracked the frosted glass in the middle of the door. She's bleeding. It must hurt, but she doesn't flinch or show any sign of pain. What the hell, right? All the confidence I'd felt in my self-defense class began to fade, because I wasn't used to people who didn't feel pain. All I can think right now is that she's on something and is having a really bad trip. So at this point, I turn on my scariest voice and tell her to come back. I tell her I'm calling the police, and if she's still here and they come, let her deal with them herself, because I don't deal with her anymore. She tries to stop me from closing the door, but I push her away and manage to lock it. I try to stand close to the door while I call 999 so they can hear me. While I wait for the police to arrive, I watch her on the security camera. She moves out of sight a few times, presumably to look around the back of the house, and I hear her calling for Margaret. A few minutes before the police finally show up, I see them kicking my trash cans furiously. But then the worst thing happens. She walks back to the front door and literally looks straight into my camera. The camera is very well hidden. I'm not saying that no one could have noticed her, but most people would only become aware of her presence if she was being looked for. Most people don't need cameras, right? But she knew she was there. She must have noticed it earlier. I don't know exactly when, but I later went through all the footage from that day and she never once looked at it. She didn't even look like that. I only had about a week's worth of her footage. The oldest tapes were re-recorded and I checked everything I had, and she was the only one on camera that day. All I can assume is that maybe she was here over a week ago or something. Looking directly into the camera, she points her finger at me and makes a throat-cutting gesture, then turns and walks away. I go to the window to watch her walk away, and she walks like she doesn't care. She doesn't look back and just walks away. Finally, the police show up. Good thing I wasn't killed. Take a statement. I give them a copy of the surveillance tape and that's it. I called a couple times to follow up, but, nothing. Nobody called me either. Not gonna lie, it's been bothering me for weeks. I moved the knife block closer to the door, but so that I couldn't see the window. I started going to bed really late and not getting enough sleep, which wasn't helping. Sometimes at night I was so tired that I would start having auditory hallucinations. I heard people talking who weren't there. Since this woman was the bane of all my stress, I heard her voice and Margaret's name the most. Every time I heard the gate open, it always threw me off balance. I looked at the surveillance tapes every day, and eventually, when a few weeks passed and I couldn't hear anything anymore, I started to calm down a bit and put it all down to a strange experience. But it didn't last long. About 4, maybe 5 weeks after the first meeting, she came back. It was just after midnight. I was sitting in the living room talking on the phone, turning the TV on low so I wouldn't be disturbed. I heard a car door slam and looked out the front window. There was a dark-colored car at the end of my driveway. I couldn't figure out what make or model it was, but it looked like some kind of station wagon. Americans seem to call them universalists, don't they? I didn't notice anyone move, but a minute or two later the gate swung open with a metallic groan and there was a knock on the door. Even if I'm not in a blood feud over an imaginary Margaret, I'm not going to open the door now. I checked the surveillance camera. The night vision mode is pretty bad, but I'm pretty sure it's the same woman again. I can even see what looks to me like a dog leash, and of course she knows I'm watching her, because she's looking at the camera again. And let me tell you, when someone already gives you such a horrible shiver, the way night vision makes people's eyes look like a soulless black void doesn't make you feel much better. Suddenly she yells, "Turn that noise off and get out here right now!" I turned on the TV, but like I said, it was on a very low volume. It was so weird because she couldn't hear him from behind the front door. I mean, I wouldn't even hear it if I walked out into the hallway. At this point, I am convinced she is mentally ill, and I call the police again. I want them to stay on the line, but they just tell me that someone will be here soon and will call them back immediately if the situation escalates. So I wait and watch and hope she doesn't start trying to break the window or something. She's kicking my trash cans again. I don't know what she has against them, but whatever, and yelling something else that I can't make out. But whatever it is, it's enough for one of the neighbors to come over and find out. I've been watching the neighbor talk to her for a minute. She proves something by pointing her finger in the direction of my front door. but eventually the neighbor manages to talk her out of it. He even stays close by to make sure it's gone. Unfortunately, that also means she left before the police showed up again and made me feel like I was in their way. Another statement, another handing over of surveillance footage, another little thing. The next day I met with the neighbor and he apologized because he didn't think to write down the license plate number, but he told me that she said pretty much the same thing I said earlier. She wanted to know where Margaret was and what I had done to her. I'm looking for answers at this point. Even if she's mentally ill, the fact that she keeps telling the Margaret story and has the correct address makes me think it's not just someone's breakdown here. But then it all becomes clear. Margaret is her dog? Does she think I stole her dog? Did she have a dog that came through the hole in the back door? Does she think I hurt her dog? So, what's the point? It was another few weeks before she came back. This time at 3 in the morning, I am awakened by a knock on the door. A few minutes later, I hear a knock on the bedroom window. I immediately realize it's her. I hear her say something, but I can't make it out because the sound from the window is too muffled. It's like she doesn't want to take her neighbor out again. So this time she tries to keep it quiet. I jump out of bed and quickly get dressed. I try my best to follow her as she moves around the house from room to room, knocking, tapping, and muttering. I think I hear some connected words that sound like noise. I'm pretty sure she called me a swear word too, but maybe I just imagined it. I can't check the security footage this time because it's splattered on the lens. Not that it matters much this time. She doesn't linger at the front door at all. I'm thinking of calling the police again, but honestly, it's a waste of time for now. I have a feeling that if I call them a third time and she's not there, they'll start accusing me of wasting my time, even though I have proof. In the end, they haven't been much help so far. As a result, I wait at the front door and listen to her. Eventually, she knocks again and I ask, "Is Margaret your dog?" Dead silence. Nothing. I can't see anything through the frosted glass because it's too dark. I have no idea where she is, and I don't want to turn on the outside light. Honestly, I don't even know why I feel this way. She knows I'm home because I called her, but I still don't want to draw too much attention to myself. As a result, I stand there for an unknown amount of time. It's been less than an hour, maybe more, because the sun has already started to rise. My heart is beating at a mile a minute most of the time. As soon as it gets light enough, I start looking out the window to see her. But no, nothing. I carefully open the front door and peek out. I still can't see her. I grab something to arm myself with just in case. I can't remember now what it was, but I checked the whole house and the garden behind the house. But she's not there. Walking back to the front door, I notice a strange thing. The gate is locked. This gate is physically attached to the side wall of my house, and when it opens and closes, it makes a nice noise. You'll immediately hear someone opening or closing it while standing next to the front door, but it's locked. So what does that mean? Did she somehow jump over it? It's possible, but I wouldn't want to try it. Anyway, I open the gate and walk to the end of the driveway. I look around, but I don't see anyone. I turn toward the house and see that she has painted a lyre on my front door and left a dog leash on the floor beneath it. Thankfully, that was the last time I heard or saw this woman. But I think she still visits occasionally. Ever since all this happened, I've been periodically struck with a terrible fear at night, and I keep looking out the window. I don't know if I thought about it or not, but every once in a while I swear I see a dark car on the street. Now it's not parked at the end of my driveway, but I can't shake the feeling that it's here and guarding my house. Perhaps she was looking for her dog and thinks she'll see me with him someday. Whatever it was, the whole thing was amazing and shook me up. I still live with it and wish it never happened. There is a small hot spring in central Idaho, near the top of Pisimarai Pass. Even though it's tucked away in plain sight, literally on the side of the road, it can't be called a famous landmark outside the valley. But local ranchers are very familiar with Barney's hot springs. It's not uncommon to see several families enjoying the water as you drive by on weekends. Barney Hot Springs, or just Barney, is incredibly remote even by Idaho standards. The small town of Salmon in the northern part of the state is at least an hour away on dirt roads. If you need a hospital, Idaho Falls Regional Hospital is more than 2 hours south. To say you're in the middle of nowhere at Barney's is to say nothing. But solitude is one of Barney's main attractions, as well as the amazing abundance of tropical fish that swim in the warm waters year-round. You can relax and enjoy the surrounding views of the mighty Rocky Mountains with little to no distractions. But Barney's is more than that. 40 years ago, this little hot spring went from a local haven to a local nightmare. On the afternoon of October 27th, 2 truckers stopped for gas at my parents' gas station and cafe in Howe, Idaho. They were hauling a load of hay or something like that over Pissamori Pass on their way to a delivery point somewhere in Utah. While the truck filled up, 2 men sat at the cafe counter and ordered coffee. While sipping coffee, the old trucker struck up a conversation with my mother and the cafe regulars. He seemed a little butt compared to his young partner. He was normal. The young man was visibly shocked and said nothing but a quiet, "Yes, ma'am," or "No, ma'am," to my mom. His attention was fixed on the cup of coffee he was clutching in his trembling hands. As the old trucker and the others talked, he recounted an unusual incident that had happened to them that day. They crossed Pissamori Pass and descended into the Little Lost Valley. As they pulled up to Barney Hot Springs, there was a child standing in the middle of the road. The truck came to a stop. Soon they realized with horror and delight what awaited them. It was not a child, but a strange humanoid creature. Its body was slender with long, thin limbs and a small, squat torso. Its head and eyes were large and amphibian-like. It was no more than the height of a preschooler. Its green skin shimmered in the midday sun. In its hands, it clutched a large bundle of eggs that could be described as hundreds. The creature watched as the truck stopped, then clumsily crossed the road and drove down the embankment. It was clear from the water trail he left behind that he had just come from Barney Hot Springs. On the other side of the road flowed a small stream hidden by thick vines. No sooner had the creature disappeared than the 2 truckers rushed away with all the speed their engine was capable of. My mother and a few of the cafe regulars took the man's story with silent, somber expressions and encouraging nods of the head. It wasn't the first time strange things had happened in this little abandoned valley. Of course, the story of the frog carrying a coddle was the most unique story they had ever heard. The regulars advised the trucker not to worry too much about the incident. For the fall, sun might just have fooled their eyes. Such reassurance seemed to reassure the men. They finished their coffee, took a few quick sips, and headed for the door. My mom and all the visitors laughed at the man's story and went on with their day. The next morning, October 28th, Idaho experienced one of the strongest earthquakes ever recorded in the area. The earthquake on Bora Peak had a magnitude of 7.5 and was felt hundreds of miles away. The infrastructure of the farms had been destroyed, roads and bridges. Even 2 children died on their way to school when a brick building collapsed on them in Calais, Idaho. It was a terrible and scary day for all Idaho residents. Barney Hot Springs was near the epicenter of the quake and did not escape its wrath. Several visitors passing by the springs this morning watched in amazement as water flowed into the ground, leaving behind a stinking mud pit. A few minutes later, to their even greater surprise, the water flowed back into the basin, but now it was boiling. It was truly an amazing geologic phenomenon. The boiling stopped immediately after the earthquake, and the water in Barney's cooled quickly. It is now more of a warm spring, having lost about 15 degrees of temperature since the quake. Since then, the frog has been seen several times, always near Barney, and almost always standing in the road. Personally, I like to think that the frog was just a caring parent saving his cubs from the shock before the earthquake struck and destroyed everything in the hot springs. Barney Hot Springs is still very popular with the locals. No one seems to be confused by the thought of sharing water with a strange little amphibian man and his family. Someone even re-released the tropical fish after they all died in the boiling water. This is just one of many amazing stories that happened in the Lost Rivers area of Idaho where I grew up. A friend of mine was born in France, and her father is 17th in line on her father's side or something like that. Actually, her father's family was historically very high-ranking French, and they have a lot of ghosts from France before the 20th century. One of those things is a dresser with a mirror. According to family legend, in the 1800s, a girl died sitting behind a dresser in front of a mirror. Let's transport ourselves to the year 2023. The dresser with the mirror is in my friend's apartment. We had a party one night, and around 2 a.m. when everyone had left, she fell asleep on her bed and I tried to sleep on her couch. It wasn't quite dark yet. I felt safe, but for some reason I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I tried to ignore it and just go to sleep. I closed my eyes and began to tire. After a few minutes of trying to sleep, I suddenly had a horrible feeling that something was wrong. I felt the presence of someone standing next to the couch. I don't know how to describe the feeling. I just knew there was something to it. I closed my eyes tighter, hoping that maybe I was just being paranoid. And then something touched my foot. Something literally touched my leg. I felt pressure on the couch next to my leg, and the blanket touched my leg in a way that suggested that something had hit or punctured the blanket next to it. It felt like someone was going to grab my legs, but at the last second, I was scared and terrified, and it wasn't some air-conditioned freak or anything like that. It was a very human and very solid feeling. My eyes widened and I suddenly woke up. For a split second, I could still feel the pressure around my leg. So I know it was a real feeling and not just a weird dream when you think something is happening in your dream. But when you wake up and you don't feel it anymore, it's obvious. What's more, I hadn't even fallen asleep. I just lay there with my eyes closed. I honestly thought at first that maybe my friend had managed to get out of bed and walk past me so quietly that I didn't notice and accidentally caught my leg or something. But then I turned my head to where my feet were and saw a human shadow standing right there, looming over me, and clear as day too. Like I said, the room wasn't completely dark, but this thing, whatever it was, let in absolutely no light. When I saw him, I instantly got a blood chill and that same inner feeling that says go away quickly. I blinked and turned away, but when I looked back, he was gone. I quickly turned around to see if my friend had gotten out of bed, but she wasn't there. What's more, it seemed to be sound asleep. I turned on my phone and using the screen light searched a bit, but found nothing. There was nothing on the couch near my leg. There was nothing in the room either. So what could I be feeling? Because there was nothing in the room that even remotely resembled a human silhouette. So what was that shadow and where did it come from? My instincts were telling me to leave, so I grabbed my bag, put on my shoes, and just left. Somehow, I felt safer walking around New York City at 2:30 in the morning than I did in my friend's apartment. So, what do you guys think about all this? I think it had something to do with the dresser and the mirror, right? But the essence was such a dark energy that it didn't seem like it was a ghost tied to the dresser. If anyone has any ideas on what I should do about all of this, I'd love to hear them. Should I talk to my girlfriend? Should we do something about it? Please let me know. I am currently dog-sitting for my grandparents, who live in a very rural area in upstate New York. They have 3 Dobermans that I love dearly, and I stay with them regularly to help with the dogs when my grandparents aren't home, just to keep them out of their cage and stuff. My grandfather was a volunteer firefighter, and he always had his police scanner on to be on standby in case of anything. He hasn't helped the fire department in years, but the scanner in their house is still on. I have gotten very used to the constant noises it makes and try to ignore them. Until last night. You see, I was standing in the kitchen next to the scanner while I was making dinner, and suddenly I heard whispers coming from the scanner. I've been listening to this thing for 21 years now, and I've never heard whispers like that. But that's not what scares me the most. My grandparents moved out of the old farmhouse a couple years ago. The farm was built about 200 years ago and is haunted. When I was home alone, one distinct sound was always heard, like a couple arguing. When they moved into the new house, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no arguments, no open doors, nothing. Until last night, when the whispering started and I started hearing arguments, just like in the old house. The sound came from outside, from the driveway. There is a window in the kitchen above the sink that overlooks the entire driveway, and when I looked out, there was nothing there. only a few birds sitting under the feeder my grandparents had set up. But then the arguing turned to shouting, and all the birds suddenly flew away. I went out on the back porch to let the dogs into the house and froze, trying to see if I could hear the arguing from the front. I thought they were coming out of the woods right in front of me. So eventually I just went back into the house and locked the door. I really didn't know what to do, so I closed all the curtains in the house and went to bed with the dogs as far away from the driveway as possible. I don't usually worry when there are bumps in the road, but being alone in a haunted house in the middle of the city is a different story than being in the woods. I know what staying here too comfortably will lead to, and it made me wary. I'm not sure if there's an explanation for it, but I just wanted to share it here because it's so awesome, isn't it? If you've listened to me this long, thanks for listening, and let's hope we don't have a repeat of that old haunted farmhouse. This happened a couple years ago. I, a 26-year-old girl, was walking my dog Indy in a local field. It was dark, but it wasn't too late. It was winter in the UK, so it must have been 6 p.m. The field is mainly used for rugby or soccer, but you can play on it any time. It is also surrounded by houses and street lights. But the field itself is dark, so I took a flashlight with me, mainly to avoid stepping in dog poop. I entered one of the exits to the pitch and followed a path leading to another exit or entrance. I used the field to walk back to the road and back to the house, giving my dog the option of being off the lead while in the field. Usually, as I walk across the field, I notice a figure walking towards the exit or entrance I was about to go through. I can't take my eyes off this figure because it's wearing very dark clothes and has its hood up. I shined the flashlight as I walked, so I knew the person knew I was there, because it was very obvious. I wasn't particularly nervous at first, more like just alert. India is a gorgeous German shepherd, so as you can tell, I feel very safe with her. It was only then that I saw the man crouched behind a bush or tree. There are many new trees and shrubs growing on the part of the field that is not used for sports. I froze in place. I was about 200 feet from the exit, but to get there, I had to walk past the bush they were hiding behind. I called Indy and put her on a leash to keep her close by. By this point, she was also alarmed by the fact that the man was hiding behind a bush. Apparently, she noticed it too. But then I hear a strange, high-pitched voice that sounds like they are saying my dog's name. I think they heard me calling for her. They repeated this 3 or 4 times in their long, high-pitched voice. It was clearly coming from the man who was hiding. Thankfully, Indy didn't react to it in any way because it probably didn't sound like her name to her. And then I had a thought. Fight or flight, or one. Run past the bushes and try to get out too. Turn around and run back into the dark field to another exit, albeit much farther away, or 3. Meet this guy face to face. Indy flinched at that moment. I'm so glad my voice didn't shake or break when I said that because I was genuinely scared at that point. He started stuttering and said, Oh, I thought you were someone I knew. I replied that who hides from someone they think they know in a dark field? He apologized a couple of times after that and continued to sneak around the rest of the field while I headed briskly towards the exit with Indy. Who knows what his intentions really were? Perhaps he thought I had a smaller dog and tried to attack me. Perhaps he saw Indy and realized he didn't stand a chance. Or maybe he really did think I was one of his acquaintances. Whatever it was awesome and very, very scary. On Friday, I left work at lunchtime to go for an overnight walk to a remote campsite in a national park about 60 kilometers from my job in Canberra. I decided not to take a tent, as I planned to sleep in a cabin with a fireplace. Things are still light-hearted around here. The hut is about 2 kilometers from many fire trails, and is only accessible via a narrow walking trail that takes about 45 minutes to climb the hill. Only a few people visit the hut each year, as it is very difficult to find and get to. My car was the only one in the parking lot, and I didn't meet a single person along the way. There is only one trail that leads up here. When it got dark, I lit a fire in the fireplace and had dinner. I was tired and decided to go to bed around 8:30 p.m. as I planned to get up early to get back to the car in the morning. But around 1 a.m., I woke up to the loud sound of a car. It's very loud. It's like being right under a helicopter or something. When I looked out the cabin window, I saw bright lights flashing around, illuminating the trees. But I couldn't make out the source of the lights, which led me to think they must be above me. I didn't get a chance to go outside and check, so I just sat in a chair and wondered what the hell was going on outside. After a few minutes, both the sound and the lights suddenly stopped, as if they never existed. There was nowhere to land nearby as the cabin is in a thick forest. After a few minutes, I worked up the courage to go outside with a flashlight, but all I could see was slightly burned grass around the shack. Nothing else was damaged or disturbed, but I stayed up the rest of the night and made it to the car before dawn. There was no way for the car to get to the cabin, and I don't think the search and rescue service would have brought up a helicopter at night in such a remote area. In addition, there are no Air Force bases nearby. Hunting is prohibited in the national park, so I have no idea what it was or what was going on. Also, I don't drink or do drugs, and I don't take any medications that could alter my perception. I don't have any mental health issues either. So, do you guys have any ideas as to what this could be? Has anyone else had similar unexplained sightings, especially around Canberra or Australia? I just watched a YouTube video online about scary rabbit holes, and while I was watching, a man wearing a hat appeared. While I was listening, I heard the guy describe him as a man with a wide-brimmed hat and a cape. I first heard about the cape, and suddenly a vivid memory came to me. I'm in my early 30s, and this memory occurred in one of the first houses I lived in when I was about 5 or 6 years old, meaning it was decades ago. I remember the memories were vivid for a few months then, but they faded over time. Generally, the house I lived in had a large window located in the living room and a front door next to it. This door was not the main door that we or guests used, as the side door went right out into the driveway. So it was very strange when at night, around 8 o'clock at sunset and in the dark, not in the middle of the night, I heard a knock on the door, a single knock. I turned around, looked out the window, and saw what I thought was a corpse at the time. Dark-winged duck. I know that's pretty funny to hear, but that's what I thought when I was a kid. A large, wide-brimmed hat, similar to a long coat, but completely black. The streetlights weren't black as pitch, but the silhouette of the dark-winged duck was just that. Of course, there was no beak or anything, but that's what I thought. At that moment, and for weeks or months afterward, I felt awful. I asked my parents if they were going to open the door, and they asked why. Apparently, they hadn't heard the rumble. I was afraid to look out, but I forced myself to, and when I did, there was no one there. But this YouTube video reminded me of it. I got goosebumps all over my skin. I don't know why the mention of the cape made me feel that way, but it just struck me. It's nice to think that at least once in my life, something unusual has happened to me, but still, it definitely sent shivers down my spine. Feel free to discuss or share your thoughts on this experience. I would like to hear more information directly from people, not videos and such. If you have any theories as to what this could be, I apologize. I am a woman, living alone in my apartment located on the first floor, so my balcony is clearly visible to the people around me. Like every night, I work at 4 a.m., so I leave around 3:40. Alas, in France, they decided to turn off the lights from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., I think. But lucky for me, the landlord of the apartment where I live turned on the lights from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. specifically for me. He's very blunt, but I'm still grateful to him. Anyway, I'm leaving this Thursday evening as usual. I got in my car, locked it, turned on the headlights, and then something caught my eye. I looked up and thought it was just a cat jumping off my balcony, because they like to come in, just look around and then leave. But it wasn't the cat. There was a man standing next to my balcony. I think the light scared him, and I watch him walk away from me across the grass. But he can't leave like that. I stare at him, scared and crying quietly, not knowing what to do, for 10 seconds. But then I see movement again, and he walks towards me, gives me a quick glance, and then just keeps walking towards the main road like nothing happened. He cast one last glance at me in the car before I lost sight of him. He was also wearing black sweatpants and a camouflage jacket, which is very cool. I don't know what he was doing here, or sleeping on my plastic couch on the balcony, or I don't know what, but I can't stop thinking about his face looking at me and what could have happened if he was outside. It was black as pitch. I wanted to file a police report, but they said they couldn't do that since there were no injuries. The woman said no to me too, but maybe it wasn't for you. Maybe he was looking for a place to stop or something. And I say, at this hour and dressed like that? I don't think so. And then she said, no, I'm talking about robbery. And I was like, sure, right? Since then, every night I run like crazy to my car with pepper spray in my hand. I also bought surveillance cameras for the balcony to check before I go outside at night. Because now I'm super paranoid. I'm developing ASD, and I have to look and check outside before I go to bed. Anyway, after that, I put cameras in there, like I said. The location is also perfect, and I can move the camera from my phone even when I'm not home. But this is where it gets even weirder. The first time I saw someone was May 4th at 3:40 in the morning. Nothing happened in June, and I thought maybe it was an isolated incident. Wrong place, wrong time. On the 4th of July, I was getting ready around 3 a.m., and 20 minutes later, I saw a notification from the camera on my phone. I wasn't nervous because sometimes my camera just shoots bugs or spiders or whatever, but oh boy, my heart jumped when I saw what was there. I opened the notification and the video started. I saw a man walking next to my balcony and covering his face. I froze for 5 minutes and decided to call the police because I didn't know if he was still there, because the camera didn't send any notifications after that. I noticed that sometimes my camera doesn't capture anything. The police arrived and he was gone, but I was certainly confused by the situation. August 23rd. Third time's the charm, isn't it? I left for work at 3:45 a.m. Yeah, right. And while I was driving, I got a notification at 3:47 a.m., and it's the same dude from July again. He still hides his face, but now I recognize his gait. I immediately called the police, and we met at my house. I cried and explained that it wasn't the first time this had happened, that I didn't feel safe and couldn't understand why it was happening. The male cops downplayed the situation, and it really annoyed me because they could see I was confused and scared, but kept telling me not to worry. Maybe he didn't come for you. I don't care. It's 3 in the morning. It's dark, and there's a random person standing outside my house hiding his face. There was basically nothing they could do because there was no damage. But I decided to put up a railing just in case, even though I know they can't do anything. I still get very nervous every night when I have to go to work. I brought pepper spray with me just in case. Besides, I have wonderful neighbors around me who have helped me in some ways. But I don't know why he's here, and why in the middle of the night. I have no idea. I'm sure I'm forgetting some details, so feel free to ask questions if you want to help me out. But anyway, thank you for listening. I am a 21-year-old female and my partner is a 20-year-old male. Last night we visited our friends for a few hours to help them get settled. They are both about our age, 19 and 18. One of our friends is known to be very spiritually gifted and has connections. She has been seeing spirits since she learned to walk and talk. I'm very spiritually connected myself, but not in the sense of being visited by spirits or anything like that. Bottom line, we were all sitting in the living room just chatting and watching the Golden Girls when our friend froze and immediately started crying. We all comforted her and asked her what was wrong. I knew immediately from the look on her face that she was looking down the hallway and seeing something. We all had a strange feeling too. It was a frighteningly quiet moment. She said she very clearly saw a tall male figure in a long white robe walking down the hallway toward the stairs leading to the main entrance. Then numerous footsteps were heard since they moved in here on Saturday. I asked her if she felt any negativity or anything, and she said no, but it definitely scared her a lot. She said she turned pale and felt a heaviness on her chest. We sprang into action, seeing how shocked they both were, realizing how uncomfortable they were now to spend the night in their new home. We brought incense, salt, and selenite into the apartment, and I scoured every corner of the house, counting on someone or something chilling in the apartment to leave. But I guess I'm just curious to know what other people think of this experience, and I'd like to know if it could mean something spiritual. I know this kind of thing can be typical of major life events like moving to a new place, but I'm looking forward to hearing from anyone who can empathize with this and has something to add. So, I want to share my experience with you in hopes of getting some advice because honestly, I'm really scared. For your information, I am 26 years old. I had never had paranormal phenomena before, and I didn't even believe in them. Last week, I moved into a new apartment with two of my friends, a 26-year-old and a 23-year-old woman, in an apartment building probably built in the 60s. The apartment has been recently renovated and looks bright and warm. It is about 100 square feet and has 3 bedrooms. The wood flooring, although new, is very noisy when you step on it. The walls are flat, you can barely hear the neighbors. The landlady is a 80-year-old woman who treats us well. The previous tenants had lived here for about 10 years, she said. The day we visited the apartment for the first time, we really liked the house, but I had a strange feeling when I walked into one of the bedrooms. It was kind of a strange, incomprehensible feeling that I quickly forgot. When we finally moved in, everything was fine for the first week. But 2 days ago, when I came home from work around 8 p.m., I was lying silently on the living room couch because no one else was home. Suddenly, I heard the floor creak, as if someone was standing in the hallway directly across from the bedroom where I got the feeling when I entered the apartment. Then the sound of fingers scratching the wood. I kept hearing these noises for about 30 minutes. I didn't move from the couch, scared, but at the same time thinking that maybe it was just a mite and the floor was reacting to the temperature or something. One of my neighbors came home and everything was fine. The other was off, but there were no more sounds. I had dinner and went to bed around 12:30. Once in my bedroom, I was lying on my bed listening to music with the pods, and I heard something. I took them off, and now I can hear someone walking behind my closed door. They walk from left to right outside the door in slow but consistent steps. You could tell from the sound that it was an adult. I open WhatsApp and send text messages in a group chat to my roommates to stop doing it. They didn't take it seriously when I told them about the noise in the hallway and thought they were playing a joke on me. Neither the neighbor who has gone to sleep in her bedroom, nor the one who left and came home without noticing the door was open, thought I was being serious. They respond to me, send me pictures, audio, and real-time location information, but I can still clearly hear someone walking slowly behind the door. Then they knock. They knock quietly and slowly. My bedroom is very small, and my bed is right in front of the door. I was fully awake and aware of what was going on. It's not neighbor noise. It's actually right in front of the door. Wrote a message in the group, "Come soon." Then I heard my roommate's door open, and she turned on the hallway light and opened my bedroom door. She freaked out and asked what was going on. I sat up in bed and realized someone was there, but it wasn't them. I had a panic attack, started choking, and felt my hands go numb. I then started crying and was in shock all night. My other neighbor quickly came home and tried to give a rational explanation. That night I slept on the couch with the lights on and the TV on. Today I did the same thing. Since then we haven't noticed any noise or strange sensations, but I'm constantly terrified and can't see the moment when I'll be able to sleep in my bedroom again. But I am convinced, whatever it was, it really happened. Someone was standing outside the door, walking around it and banging on it. I don't know what to make of it, but the whole thing has definitely thrown me off. For about 2 years now, I have periodically heard a hand knocking on the wall between my room and the attic. Before anyone says it's chipmunks or other pests, please rule it out. Believe me, I have had the place checked many times by pest control services, and there is no visible infestation, and traps and baits have been set and remain intact to this day. Unless it's on the other side of the bedroom wall in the attic, the only place it could be coming from is outside the wall. Imagine a garage roof attached to a house where the attic is above the garage. Notice it has happened at all times of the day, and mostly when I am alone. But it has also happened with my wife in the room. In fact, my wife and I often hear noises in the house. We keep going back and checking our surveillance cameras to explain them. I'd say 80% of it is impossible to explain. Again, trust me, if anyone is looking for cause and effect, it is me, an absolute proponent of the paranormal. but there is simply no way to explain it. I was also in my basement studio and could hear my wife and kids coming into the garage through the door. I've heard kids running around. I have my microphone and studio headphones on. I definitely hear it, but when I go upstairs, they're not home yet. But one night, I heard a tapping on my basement bedroom window. That tapping of a finger on the window, perfectly clear as day. I'm 43 years old, and I know what it is. I also know that there is nothing near that window that could make that sound. I have this window 100% closed, and the picture is perfectly matched, so no one can get in or out. It goes on for about 10 minutes, and I'm walking down the hallway to the kids' playroom. Imagine the letter L and 2 windows equidistant from the corner. I go there, the lights are off, everything is perfectly visible, except for the shadows from the trees cast by the streetlights. I sit there for 10 minutes, but nothing. The knocking seems to have stopped as well. But no sooner had I taken 2 steps into the hallway than I heard a knock on the playroom window. At this point, I got angry and rushed to the door, grabbing one of my pistols as I went, and I want to say that no one could escape my gaze anymore. But when I got to the door, no one was there. I went back and looked at the cameras and did my best, but nothing. The only thing we caught on camera was a very loud stomping of feet from our bedroom, located directly above the living room. I wasn't home, but my wife and kids were clearly startled because the stomping was so intense that the lights on the ceiling flickered. Again, there is no explanation for this. And no, I'm not going to agree that vermin have taken up residence in the house. It's clearly a foot stomping the floor with such force that the light is dimmed. So the main floor laundry room separates my studio from the master bathroom on the 2nd level. My wife has a wheelchair in her dressing table, and I can hear her riding it when she goes to bed. I shouldn't, but I hear it and text her at 2 or 3 in the morning asking why it's spinning like that. But there's always no answer, and when I check, she's asleep, so it's really not her. Also, I hear quite often what sounds like a person banging a stick on the floor above my studio. I am an engineer with a background in mechanical systems and noises, and I can assure you that there are no systems, equipment, or associated lines nearby that could be causing this. Yes, I get freaked out from time to time and my hair stands up for no reason. Yes, I see something constantly moving in my periphery, in the hallway. I sleep with the door open and there's always a nightlight on in the hallway. Yes. One morning the barn door to the bonus room was locked after I intentionally left it open. Same thing in the hallway. Whatever it is, I'm afraid it's like a little demon or something. My wife and I were watching a documentary about NASA engineers who were stalked by this little guy in the same room. My son, who was 7 at the time, fell asleep there one night while watching some children's movie. I woke him up that morning and the first thing he said was, "I woke up early and heard quiet footsteps around the bed. I said it must have been a dog, and he replied, 'No, Dad, those were the footsteps of a little man.' My garage has also caught fire twice this week, which is weird, but anyway, it's more than that, but it does give you an idea of what's going on. I don't know what to do with all this because it's definitely not my forte. Like I said, I've always been skeptical of these things, and so I've never shied away from them. But now that I'm confronted with this, I really need help."